Welcome to the Linguistic Validation Café series, a place to gather, connect, learn, and grow together by creating community, embracing our cultures, and sharing our passion for linguistic validation. This is the space and time we take to embrace diversity and discuss how to improve the human aspects of medical translation. In this first episode, we're going to talk about what is linguistic validation and what is not, and how to expand our medical translation career beyond AI by becoming a linguistic validation specialist. With our expert guests, Talita Domiciano and Mariana Teixeira. I am your host, Nur Ferrante, and this is the Linguistic Validation Café. Well, thank you for joining us for our first episode of the Linguistic Validation Café series. And to find out all together what is linguistic validation and what is not, and how to expand your medical translation career beyond AI by becoming a linguistic validation specialist. With our expert guests, Talita Domiciano and Mariana Teixeira. Hello, Talita and Mariana, welcome.
Hello, Nur.
Hello. I'm going to introduce you briefly so that other people can know who you are. Talita Domiciano is a pharmacist, medical translator, and linguistic validation consultant with a bachelor's degree in pharmacy and a Ph.D. in health sciences. And Talita became a full-time translator in 2019 after 3 years of a postdoctoral research in immunology and inflammation. Working with English and Brazilian Portuguese, she has expertise in several areas within the medical domain, including clinical trials, training materials, and pharmacovigilance. And Mariana Teixeira is a medical translator and linguistic validation consultant with a background as a healthcare professional. With a bachelor's degree in nuclear medicine and a master's degree in translation, Mariana became a full-time translator in 2017 after a 5-year period as a lecturer in nuclear medicine and radiotherapy. Working from English and French into Portuguese, she has expertise in several areas within the medical domain, including clinical trials, training materials, and medical devices. In 2024, she officially added linguistic validation to her services after attending Art of Diversity's course on the subject. So welcome our linguistic validation experts. And I just want to mention that we have the whole group of the Linguistic Validation Café here with us accompanying. And we will share today a discussion after Talita and Mariana talk to us about this topic that we have today, which is linguistic validation an imperative or just a trend? So thank you very much to both of you for being here today, and to all those of you who have joined us for this open, relaxed, informal, and fascinating discussion. My first question, so for people who don't know what linguistic validation is, so what is linguistic validation? Would you care to begin? Talita, for example, want to tell us?
Sure. Well, I think most important from the beginning is to understand and to define what linguistic validation is not, because there is a legit concern about the services offered in the translation business. And when you look to the fast development of machine translation, AI, new software available on the market that make translation easier, faster, and decrease the costs. Some agencies or some freelancers, they want to make up some new terms to make their translation more valuable or to increase the cost. So they may come like, well, localization is not enough anymore. So we need to translate with machine translation, and then do the linguistic validation. So this is not a marketing terminology. So this is not the real linguistic validation. So it's not a marketing thing to increase the costs. Linguistic validation has nothing to do with it. Linguistic validation is the official name of a full process that belongs to the medical translation context. So more specifically, I would say that it's an essential phase of every drug development cycle in a clinical trial, and is designed to in the context of clinical outcome assessments. So it's understandable that people may be afraid of it's just a new term or just something to increase cost, but it's not it. It's something really real and very important in the medical translation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's true, because sometimes it's known by the meaning that you explained to us, that and that's not linguistic validation, at least what we speak about in life sciences. Yes. Mariana, would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. I would like to go back and first of all, thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
I would like to go back a little bit further, because Talita's comment is very pertinent. But I think before that, we have to consider that medicine is changing all around the world. So before, what we had is we had a diagnosis, and then we have a specific treatment for a diagnosis, and we would evaluate that treatment based out of biomarkers, essentially. So imaging, tests, etc. This would be the most subjective we would have in medicine, in healthcare, and these would be our main parameters. And they are still our main parameters. But right now we are changing a paradigm that we had, which was a disease-centered approach, into a patient-centered approach. So the patient is more an active, has a more active role on their own treatment choices, but also in saying what is important to them and how they are feeling. So right now we use, like Talita says, the clinical outcome measures and assessments. The most common of them, of course, are the PROs, the patient-reported outcomes, to evaluate how the treatment is going, if a treatment is working or not, based out of what a patient feels, functions, and survives. So, so what happens is these PROs, these patient-reported outcomes, they need to be translated, and they need to be accurately translated and adapted into each language, because as one question to a patient in the United States, if it's literally translated into Portuguese, it may be interpreted completely differently by a Portuguese patient. Or maybe the Portuguese patient doesn't understand it because it doesn't have the context, the cultural context that the American question would have to, the American patient would have. So, and that the question requires. So this is an entire process. It's not picking up a questionnaire and translating it. Now it's translating it, adapting it, and testing it in real life patients with real life conditions. And that's why it's much more complex than, I would say, a simple translation, though that is a very controversial term.
Yeah. Thank you, Mariana, for introducing what linguistic validation is and its importance, because it's true, it's not medical translation. I mean, it's within the area or the special life sciences area of medical translation, but it's not medical translation per se. And could you maybe very briefly tell us about the process, just very quickly, maybe you, Talita, or if you want to continue, Mariana, whichever prefers.
Well, before, if Mariana wants to talk to the process, she can go first, but I would like to make a comparison between the linguistic validation, the questionnaires, the role of the questionnaires with a biomarker, completing what Mariana said. What do you think?
Go ahead. Yes,
So
it would be great.
And then if something missing, we can talk more about the process.
Sure.
But speaking as a pharmacist and as a researcher, I like to do the comparisons to make it easier to break down to people to understand. So in the pharmaceutical industry and the pharmaceutical sciences, I could compare the clinical outcome assessments to a blood test, for example. That would be, like Mariana said, a biomarker. When you want to, what's the role of a biomarker? You want to prove that a biomarker is reliable, a new biomarker, for example, to measure an endpoint, you have to demonstrate that that measuring molecule or gene or parameter is robust, accurate, and precise in order to be able to use it in the clinical trial context or when dealing with a patient, treating a patient. You have to demonstrate it. That's a scientific approach. But unfortunately, today, we don't have biomarkers for all diseases that defined. Some diseases like Alzheimer's, for example, doesn't have a biomarker yet. So we can say, oh, you measure in your blood and you say it's positive, you have this disease. So for many diseases, we don't have it. That's, or maybe even when we have it, this biomarker sometimes or many times doesn't capture all the symptoms that a patient may feel and report. So we have a lack of relevant information that is not being captured. That's why you need these questionnaires. And because they will make the same role as a biomarker, they also need to be proven reliable, robust, accurate, and precise. So when you do a clinical outcomes assessment, that's what happens. Okay, so when you translate it, it's like it's just a new biomarker because it's a new language. And as Mariana said, the culture may influence how we understand. And if we don't validate that with real people in real world, that won't be reliable. So that's where linguistic validation comes to fill this gap of information. And because it needs to be reliable in the source language, it also needs to be proven reliable in the target language and in all the target languages. So that's how I understand is that it's linguistic validation would be like a scientific approach. That's why it's so important to validate the questionnaire, in other words. So that's
Yes.
how I see it as a medical professional.
Yes, it's undoubtedly the most scientific way we have or to evaluate these kinds of questionnaires like they were math, which is not possible, of course, because these are highly subjective, but we do what we can with them, and with linguistic validation is also about that, about evaluating them as accurately as possible within a context. Yes, that's very important, Talita.
Yeah, because we do translation and cultural adaptation. That's what we do in linguistic validation, right? And
exactly.
You mentioned something, Mariana, that in relation to clinical trials that are patient-centered. And in this case also, for me, it's very relevant that through these questionnaires, patients have a voice in clinical trials, and they can really express what cannot be expressed by a biomarker, really, because it's subjective, as you indicated, but it's the symptoms. It's how the patient feels, functions, and survives. You mentioned also, Mariana, and this is, I think, from a humane point of view, it's highly relevant, and it's as important as, for example, if the patients in a questionnaire respond in a way that the results mean that the intervention or the medication doesn't improve the quality of life, the entire clinical research may not go ahead, may not be possible to market that medication or that research intervention. So it's as relevant as that. And our role
because
is...
you can have survival, which is, overall survival is the main endpoint for most of clinical trials. You can have a 10 years overall survival. Well, that's very good and well, but what is the price of those 10 years? Does the patient is living with pain, daily pain, then excruciating pain? Maybe it's not worth it, and that's, it sounds basic, but it's relatively new to think about this specifically.
Yes, and sometimes the contrary is possible. You may have a new drug with the same efficacy rate, but then what's the difference? So why would we adopt this new drug if it's just the same? And me too. But then you have a questionnaire that shows that this drug has less side effects or way better or bearable. So it adds up value to that drug. So it's a better drug, not because it just improves overall survival, but it brings quality of life. So that may be the great difference of a trial, for example. And we know that many good drugs, they don't continue on trials because patients can't bear the side effects. So if we had a questionnaire, we could for these cases, we could capture the side effects and know how to improve something or know why they couldn't bear it, for example. So that's the really important point of the questionnaires, and to hear the patient.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
but
right.
You asked about the process, and as I said, it's a complicated process. It's a complex process with several steps. The mains, I would think, would be you have to have a clear idea of what you are evaluating with that specific questionnaire. So, and with each item on that questionnaire, each question of that questionnaire, what is it evaluating? And for that, you need to have a concept elaboration for you to be able to say that, well, this question means this. And then each translator in their own specific countries will say, okay, to evaluate that, maybe this question, maybe I need to phrase it this way for my Portuguese people to be able to understand. So that you have several steps of preparation before starting the translation that are fundamental. I would, because it would be too, lengthy to explain everything here, I would say that concept elaboration is, to me, the most important part before the translation itself. And then you have a series of translations. You usually have two forward translations, and then you have back translations. So you have to translate it back in English, usually in English, because it's the source language, the more common source language, to check if if the translation is okay, is according to the original. And a series of reconciliations as well, and reviews by several professionals. Ideally, the developer of the questionnaire will also be able to review everything. And then you have the most important, I would say, step, which is the cognitive debriefing with like I said, real patients in real life setting situations, in which you will be asking them, what do you think this question means? And they will say, oh, I think this means, I would answer this like, it means X to me. And you say if it's according to what's intended. And sometimes it's not, and you have to rephrase it. And you can have also, when it's appropriate, clinician review, which is the review by a doctor usually. of the every terminology, everything in the instruments is okay, and final quality check. So there's a lot. It's a very complex process. I just highlighted the main parts, but you know, it's not only translating. That's for sure. It takes months, and it takes a very extensive team of sometimes dozens of people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Mariana. You explained it great. And yeah, I hope people who are new to linguistic validation have a more clearer idea now. Regarding us, the people who do the linguistic validation processes, I wanted to ask you, why is the medical translator the perfect person to start as a linguistic validation consultant, which is how we call the person who is living in the target country and is like this specialist, let's say, in linguistic validation? Why the medical translator is the perfect person for this? Either of you who wants to answer?
Well, I believe because the medical translation is already familiar to the terminology, which is very specific. And also you have to understand the vocabulary and the slight differences of, for example, bruising and itching. So how would it translate it? How would you say this word if you were talking to a doctor, if you're talking to a patient? Because with a doctor, it would be a more technical terminology, and with a patient, maybe you have to break it down and explain the symptom instead of naming the symptom. And also it is extremely important that the translator and the linguistic validator is native in that language. Because, for example, recently I had the experience of talking to a clinician for a version of an instrument that is not available in Brazilian Portuguese. So they have been using the Portuguese from Portugal version because that's what they had. And he said, well, the patients don't really understand some terms, they're not familiar to that. So that's very specific, and the medical translator, a native medical translator would be able to dig in that details and discuss with the developer the words, the better wording in order to address that list of concepts that Mariana mentioned. So you have to understand the terms, to address that list, and to pay attention to the cultural differences. And the medical translation is the one which is more familiar to all this process and have the skills and tools to it.
Yes, and I think in linguistic validation, this is true for every medical translation, I think, but for linguistic validation, it's even more, is that there is not a common Portuguese, for example, like Talita said, or a common English version or a common French version, because for Portuguese, which is our reality, mine and Talita's, for Portuguese, well, Brazil is a completely different country from Portugal. And in our case, Portugal does have a lot of influence and a lot of access to Brazilian culture, but the reverse is not actually true. So they do not understand Portuguese references from Portugal, you know, and we do not have the same reality as Brazilian people. So of course it needs adaptation. I'm actually surprised for Talita, with Talita saying me that there is a Portugal version, but it's not a Brazil version of that, because there are so many more people than us that usually the opposite happens. Usually there's always the Brazilian version, but never the Portuguese version. Yes, but it's very important to also say that. It's not a difference in language, it's a difference in culture. So it needs to be adapted to the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also because we have so many translation steps, because we also do translation. So the medical translator, of course, it's so very important in the process. And for example, what would you say for medical translators who don't have a medical background? Because you, Talita, Mariana, and myself have medical backgrounds, but there are many medical translators interested in becoming linguistic validators, but well, they don't have that medical, let's say, formal training, because they are medical translators and probably they have studied on their own. But what would you suggest to them, or how you consider that issue?
I would say that you don't need, you know, if you are a medical translator and if you're a good medical translator, chances are that you have attended trainings on medical issues and if you, conditions, etc., and you will be updated on what is happening in the healthcare world. And I think that's the most important thing. Going into linguistic validation without knowing what is a clinical trial, for example, is extremely hard, of course. But usually medical translators do know that because they translate medical clinical trials every single day. So I would say that if you are a good medical translator, it is, of course, easier to understand the why we are here and the basics and the concepts of behind this, with having a medical background, of course. But with correct adequate training, it's not inaccessible, not in the least, I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Mariana, and I would add up that besides being a medical translation and have the training, and so it's perfectly possible, you need to have a passion for people when you go into linguistic validation, because then you wouldn't be caring only for the words or the better wording, but you would care for the words that touches the person, that connects the person with the content, so the person can really understand and really express themselves. So you need both. You need a background in not medical training, but a training in the field in medical translation. It's enough. If you, as Mariana said, if you are a good medical translator, you are able to do linguistic validation, and also this passion for people, for understanding people and to communicating better with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because sometimes, well, as you mentioned, the importance or relevance in clinical trials that these clinical outcome assessments have. In linguistic validation, we have best practices that have been drafted by ISPOR, the FDA, and well, other specialized groups that give us like the guidance of how to proceed. And there is the role of the in-country consultant, and as defined in those guidelines, it's preferable that they have a medical background, mostly for conducting the cognitive debriefing interviews. But it's true that in practice, we are seeing that medical translators with this specialization are more and more doing this cognitive debriefing interviews, and they're doing them with a high proficiency. And to me, I think it's a very beautiful part of our medical translation career, because normally we are used to being behind the screen in our computers at home by ourselves without any contact with any patient ever. And linguistic validation gives us the chance to connect, as Talita was beautifully expressing, and to listen to patients and be able to leave a mark, let's say, in their process of healing. And I think that's a beautiful thing that we can do. And to me, it's one of the things that make me feel passionate about linguistic validation, let's say.
Yes,
So
and
yeah.
if you could let me add, it's not a given, unfortunately, that a healthcare professional or someone with a background in healthcare will know how to talk to patients.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more than having that crossed out of your resume. It's important that you want to talk to them and that you are in a people person, or at least that you know how to communicate with
Mm-hmm.
patients, which is not guaranteed if you're a nurse or
Mm-hmm.
anything else.
That's right. That's right. Very true. So what challenges and opportunities do you see with in relation to linguistic validation and medical translators becoming linguistic validators?
Well, it is an opportunity. I will say I'll speak about the elephant in the room. It is an opportunity to diversify our portfolio and our services in the AI age, because till AI be able to do everything and culturally adapt and sometimes it's hard even for us as human beings to say, how am I going to ask this question in a way a person will actually understand what I'm you know what I'm what I'm what I'm questioning. It's yeah.
Yeah, because you mentioned AI, and yeah,
The
it's
elephant in the
our
room,
hot topic,
AI.
really. Yeah, AI and linguistic
So
validation, and yeah, do you think
yeah.
it's possible that AI can replace partially or entirely the linguistic validation consultant? That leads us to that idea.
So if you talk to people that are passionate for AI, they are absolutely sure that AI may substitute everything with way better than humans do. That's I have some AI passionates here in my home, and they just talk about AI can improve medicine and all. From hearing from them, I want to believe that AI will play a bigger role in translation and improve the quality of our work, like doing some steps that are that are harder, that are just time consuming, but doesn't have this touch of human thing. Like it, AI wouldn't be able to do a cognitive debriefing interview, for example, but it can like help us in the translation steps, making it faster, because this, as Mariana said, this whole process is complex and takes a lot of time, months, people. So probably AI will develop and help us in this process. But I don't believe that we are close to having AI substituting the role of a linguistic validator. So
I do.
it may
I
help,
agree.
but it's something that is developing, but it's not for now.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
maybe we can even like help AI develop, because it's a tool that we're gonna use. And well, it's a tool. A tool doesn't work by itself. Someone will need to operate the tool. So linguistic validator will still have a role uh, in this part.
Yeah. It's true that linguistic validation is very much less influenced by AI, but the reality is that it's being considered its use and how it can be integrated, because it's what we are living in these times. But even if we use it, as you said, Talita, we will need to program it or prepare it. So in the end, we are as necessary. So this is such a complex process that it needs humans all the time. So that's a positive thing for us.
The cognitive debriefing interviews, it's an important point, are an important point, because if I answer my phone and it's a robot talking to me, I will just put my phone down. I will not answer, because there are automatic, surveys and everything that are done nowadays. And I think for patients, it's the same thing. You can put a robot asking a patient, what do you think this this means? The patient will not answer, or they will not, be as accurate or be as precise or be as interested. They need the human there.
That's
Yeah,
so
the
true.
patient might even not trust that the answer that he is receiving is real.
Yes, or maybe
Well,
it's recording. You don't. Are you sure you want this is recording, etc.?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to open brief in a few moments the group discussion. And I just wanted to ask you last question. Why did you choose to learn about linguistic validation and start offering this service? I'm curious.
I can start. Well, I had contacts with linguistic validation since I started as a translator, mostly with translating, doing the forward translations for questionnaires, some harmonizations, etc. But very loose strands of the process. But I knew about it, and I have attended a couple of talks about linguistic validation, and I wanted to go further and learn more about that. And then it was that's why when it was when your company decided to launch the linguistic validation course, I was like, okay, this is exactly what I was hoping for, because I get bored after, a certain amount of years doing the same thing every single day. So I wanted something different, and I wanted to diversify my services, as I was saying. So it was the perfect moment and a great opportunity to actually enter within linguistic validation in a more, a general way, instead of only the translation.
That's lovely. It's difficult to get bored with linguistic validation, which that is a very nice thing. And what about you, Talita?
Well, for me, I also wanted to diversify my services, but also I transitioned from research to translation a few years ago. And I had this background as a researcher, and I love research, and I love talking to patients. I wanted to contribute more, and I wanted to that my background could be more useful. So I knew that knowing the process, the whole process of linguistic validation, I could participate more and offer my background and my inputs. And I like to, I really love to break down the words to make it easier for patients. I want patients to be heard. I am a patient myself, and I wish I was more heard in my disease. So this is a way that I can use all my knowledge to contribute to patients, contribute to the field, to be a better translator, and offer a new service in my portfolio that is not much affected for machine translation, for example. Yeah, so
That's great.
so it's a perfect scenario for me. So I
yes,
just
indeed.
love linguistic validation.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you. So we're going to open the group discussion, and we have a first comment here in the chat, but I'm going to let him say it. Mario, are you there? You can share with us your insight. And
Yes, thank you.
hello, Mario.
Hello everyone, first of all. I just wanted to mention that I completely agreed with your comments about AI for linguistic validation. I think that, AI is trained on the data we humans create. So if these things are like new developments, things that are still being created by medical professionals or whatever, I don't think we can trust AI to do any of these things because, as I said, there's not enough data to train AI to do a good job. So I think the human touch in this case is honestly what makes validation, linguistic validation what it is, right?
Mhm.
But I also agree that there should be some tasks that we might leverage AI for in linguistic validation. Like actually, I was wondering if for transcribing cognitive debriefing interviews, or I don't know, maybe on any other processes. I'm still rather new to linguistic validation, so I would really like to know your insights on what uses we could have with AI in linguistic validation.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Mario. Mario is a dentist and linguistic validation consultant to be very soon, a medical translator from Venezuela and Colombia. And thank you so much for your question. And I personally think that maybe AI, yes, it can be a good tool for transcribing. When we have the recordings from the responses from the patients or participants, we need to type and transcribe everything, and maybe AI can help us with that. The only setback of that is that the audios will need to be like, all the material from the patients is completely confidential. So I'm not sure that's one of the problems that we are having with AI. Up to what point everything that we share with the tool, it's going to remain confidential or not. And if we can get to that, then there shouldn't be any problem. But if not, yeah, we'll need to.
I can tell you that if you're using a free tool, it is 100% not confidential, and you cannot guarantee the confidentiality. That's rule number one. Rule number two is, if you're paying for it, they guarantee the confidentiality outside the company. Let's imagine Google. You provide them with your information every day. Google uses all your information to everything they want, because contractually they can. But they actually they have confidential, they have requirements for quality of and confidentiality and everything, that it has to be anonymized and everything, and brand names cannot be recognized, etc. So they will use it within specific parameters, and that's why everybody works with them. But yeah, if it's free, do not use it at all.
Okay, anyone else would like to add something? I'm going to invite you all to just open your microphones, relax, and enjoy. Remember that it's an informal gathering, and
wait, are we still recording?
yes, we're still recording.
So it's an informal gathering that we're recording.
Yeah. Can you
okay.
introduce yourself, Cajo? So briefly, maybe your language pair and.
Sure, yeah. My name is Cajo. I've been a translator since 2017. My language pair is Spanish to English, and I've been working on linguistic validation projects for the last 3 years. And I don't have the breadth of formal medical education that Talita and Mariana have, so it's been really interesting to listen to both of you. I could sit here and listen to you guys talk all day. But it's been, for me personally, over the last 2 years, it's been really interesting, because I see a big difference between the, let's say, isolation of translating and the interaction involved, the interaction that you have with patients. I've interviewed almost 200 people at this stage, which is, depending on the length of the interview, let's say 300 hours, 400 hours of conversations with people with illnesses, which is, I'm lucky enough not to have an illness myself. But some of the people that I've spoken to over the last few years have some quite serious illnesses, and it's been quite eye-opening to me to get a glimpse into the lives of people who who have to live with an illness, sometimes quite serious illness, and there's a certain sense of satisfaction that I get from being involved in a small part of the process to help maybe at some point improve the lives of people who live with the disease, and I work on primarily legal translations. I also work on medical translations, but I don't think I've ever really gotten the sense of satisfaction from pure translation than I have from interacting with people in a linguistic validation project. Which just even the fact of recruiting patients and interacting with patient support charities and organizations. I generally donate to them a fee when I finish the project, and even doing something small like that there's a certain level of satisfaction that you're being able to help or give back some way in some small way as well. So yeah, there are a couple of the things that I would note as being let's say benefits of working in linguistic validation. There is the danger that one of your patients may not make the end of the project, which can happen sometimes, and that's one of the downsides, and that can be one of the challenges of working on these projects is some of the conversations are quite real, I would say, depending on the illness. People are describing their daily lives, and it can be a challenge to keep the conversation focused on the linguistic element of the questionnaire. But it's hard to find a balance. You're asking people to answer a questionnaire, to paraphrase a questionnaire, but you're trying to steer them away from it becoming a therapy session. So it can be, there's a fine line to walk, I think.
Yeah. It requires compassion. Yes.
And I would say interaction with patients, but also with colleagues, because we don't do everything alone. We need forward translators, we need back translators, we need, to contact linguists, people to review our job, people to discuss with us certain aspects. So it's really a team effort. It's not lonely at all.
Yeah.
I wanted to add something on the AI topic, if I may.
Yes, can you introduce yourself? And
sure, of course, Tomislav. Well, a translator since 2009, working on linguistic validation for about 10 years now, and for the last 3 years, we're running a small business focused on linguistic validation for a number of languages. Regarding the topic of AI, well, it's all around us. I think just yesterday, there was this LinkedIn post by Lionbridge. They had a small research done. They will be presenting the poster on this year's ISPOR conference in Barcelona. And they had small research done. They have analyzed, they asked AI to analyze the cognitive debriefing reports and to suggest whether the feedback by the patients is identical as the source text. Is it semantically equivalent that the patients have understood, or does it need further revision? And they got, per the poster, they got great results of 95% precision. Which doesn't mean someone will be eliminated. You will always need a person to review and to check AI, of course, but it has potential to speed some things up. Where I also see room for using AI not to do the job, but to use it as a tool is when developing the concept elaborations or concept definitions. AI can certainly be of help by trying to provide, you don't always have an idea on how to explain something in different words. AI can do that, can provide synonyms, can provide suggestions for defining something in a different way. Research is also being prepared within a working group at ISOQUAL, and it will be aimed at industry professionals asking about their attitudes about AI and linguistic validation. So hopefully this will be published sometime next year, and we'll also have some more insights on what do people in the industry believe where this is going, in which direction.
Yeah, it's nice that you mentioned that, Tomislav, because I had the privilege, let's say, of receiving that survey. I guess you too. And I don't know if other industries are doing the same, but they are asking people in the industry what they think for the different steps of linguistic validation and so on. If AI would be a good thing or not, how could be used. So I think that's a very ethical way of going or proceeding, let's say. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. What I see here from AI, the difficult thing is that cultures are changing constantly. And even though AI has the information of our lives and our cultures, maybe it's not within the nuances. And so for example, analyzing the report after we do the cognitive debriefing interviews, many issues arise during the interview that only a human person having the breath or breathing the atmosphere of the moment in the culture will be able to grasp and to consider. So I agree that it will help us, but always as a great tool, even. Yeah. So anyone else wants to add something before we go, because we are in the hour? Anyone else would like to comment? Feel free to share. No? Okay, no more questions? Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Talita, Mariana. It was amazing to hear you and to learn so many things and to discuss these topics in our first episode. And well, thank you also to the people that are listening. And well, hope to see you in our next episode with more interesting topics in the Linguistic Validation Café. And thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and especially to our community of the Linguistic Validation Café, since this is a joint venture and its creation is the result of all of us together. The Linguistic Validation Café is an informal monthly gathering within the Art of Diversity Linguistic Validation Training Program.